Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. I'm so glad you're here listening to the podcast. I say it all the time, and I'll continue to say it. I really appreciate you for listening into the podcast because we wouldn't have a podcast without you listening. And because you've been listening so faithfully, we've been ranked in the top 5% of all podcasts globally according to Listen Notes. So thank you for listening and really appreciate you. And continue to help us out. Go ahead and rate, review, subscribe. I know you hear those words all the time. They seem meaningless, but they're meaningful. So if you do that, really appreciate it. All right. Now, today I'm talking with Dr. Jessica Werner. Now, let me tell you about Dr. Jessica. She is the founder and CEO of NorthShore Learning. And from teaching across the globe, Jessica witnessed a common struggle: burnout among educators and declining student behavior. This drove her to establish North Shore Learning, a groundbreaking initiative offering personalized life coaching style professional development for teachers. I just have to pause and say, I think that's an amazing idea. I love that. Anyway, okay, now back to our intro. With a PhD in education, Jessica is not just an academic, but a dynamic force reshaping classrooms worldwide. Her expertise in behavior support, social and emotional learning, and holistic student approaches sets her apart. Through North Shore Learning, Jessica is passionately committed to retaining quality teachers and creating an inclusive, supportive educational experience for all. Welcome, Dr. Jessica Werner.
I'm excited to be here.
I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here. Okay, so now you heard me just read your official introduction. Now, tell us in your own words more about who you are and then about the work you do.
It's so crazy to hear the introduction because if you had said 10 years ago, in 10 years, this is what you'll be doing, and I would not believe it. So yeah, I'm so happy to be here. I'm Jessica. I'm a former teacher, elementary school, middle school. I taught preschool even. I did a stint and taught around the US, around the world, was super committed to education. I still am, and in students and working with kids. But I found it was really, really hard. And I mean, we know this, we know teaching is a hard job, but the job was getting harder. And when it came time to decide if I would keep teaching or pursue my doctorate, I thought, I don't know how anybody could do grad school and teach at the same time, like too much emotional drain. So I left the classroom to study. And I honestly didn't think necessarily I would be back in schools. My doctorate is in policy, and specifically, I was doing work internationally and hoping to do work with humanitarian aid, which I did end up doing. But I just can't stay away. I can't stay away from schools. And I think my heart understands teachers, understands and sees how hard it is. It's getting harder. Obviously, the pay is not increasing. And now that I have kids in the system, I think it's so important to know and to be able to take for granted that our children, A, will have teachers and will have really good teachers. So I do what I do now, honestly, just to try and keep good teachers in schools feeling supported. And it's such a privilege. I feel like I have the world's best job.
Love that. And I love that the way you say school and education has always been a part of your heart and you made it work for you. You had different iterations of it. And I have to say, God bless you. You even taught preschool. I mean, I can't even imagine.
Preschool's special. That is a special, it takes special people for all the ages, but I think specifically middle school and preschool,
Oh, yeah.
a special person.
Yes. My heart goes out to the middle schoolers, teachers all the time. I mean, I have the good fortune of teaching, students that are 18 through 21. So it's a little easier. Yeah. Yeah. But I love that you transitioned, you kept your heart close to your heart, and then you made it look different. All right, you started out saying 10 years ago you would never have imagined, after hearing your introduction, you said 10 years ago you wouldn't have imagined. What was happening 10 years ago that you wouldn't have imagined doing what you're doing now?
Well, I just think I never foresaw being a business owner. It was never like a dream. I never thought, oh, I want to do that. In fact, when I saw or heard about small businesses, it kind of scared me a little bit. I always felt like, wow, those people are really brave because it looks hard. How do you get customers? How do you how do you put the word out? And so I've always had a lot of respect for business owners, but I never thought, oh, that'll be me. And so my journey into it was really unexpected. Um, and when you haven't gone the entrepreneurial route, you don't really think about it too much. You know, we get a job, we keep our job, we take our vacation, we get our paycheck. It never occurred to me that I could kind of build my own work. Because in our family, we don't have a history of entrepreneurship. We have a history of really hard, amazing workers. But I didn't have any kind of model for that to think, okay, that's what I want to do. So I think it's amazing because the fact that I did it without intending to, and that it's been working and we've been evolving and I'm learning this thing. I feel like I'm getting a PhD in business, but I'm starting in kindergarten because to go from teaching or any real industry into being an entrepreneur is very different. So I feel like a kindergartner.
Yeah, yeah. And you're doing it. You're doing it. Okay, so what happened? How the change happened? What was happening around the time when you started to make the shift? What were you doing in terms of work? And then how did the idea come up? What was happening to bring it up for you?
I have to say it happened pretty slowly. It definitely wasn't like an epiphany. It wasn't obvious. I had a full-time job. I was working in international development and it was a dream job. I was leading um, teacher professional learning with local schools in East Africa. It was a dream. I loved it. Um, I loved the communities we worked with. I loved the people who were on my team. But what I didn't realize is that for the years I did that, there wasn't a whole lot of growth, like personal and professional growth. I was kind of repeating the same playbook. And that was fine for a while, but then I got to the point where I wanted to innovate, and that wasn't really allowed at the time for different reasons. But then I started getting a little curious. Like, okay, I didn't realize that was something I needed to be fulfilled. What can that look like? So, since graduate school, which I graduated officially in 2012 or 13, uh, I had started teaching in the teacher ed program, so aspiring teachers. So even when I was working in international development, I was teaching graduate students how to be teachers, classroom management, and part of the work was supervision. And that was my favorite part, where I would go into the school, I would watch them in action, we would debrief. And it was after visiting a school, and the principal said, you've done a lot of work with our student teachers. Do you think you could do some of the same things with my other teachers? And that was where the idea sparked. And my immediate answer was, I don't know. Can you? Like, is there funding for that? What does that look like? I had no idea. So I said yes, because that's just a good rule of thumb to start saying yes whenever you're asked a question. Can you do this? Yes. And then I started doing what I do really well, probably from the doctorate, is I started researching. I was like, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to ask around. I'm going to figure out what people charge. Um, and that was the first contract. It was I of course way undercharged because I didn't know any better, and I still probably way undercharged, honestly. But because that doesn't get easier, it doesn't get easier to figure out pricing and your value, what you're worth. But I loved it. And I said to him at the end of that experience, I said, "Do you think any other principals would be interested in this?" And he said, "Yeah, I'll pass your name along." And again, that was like a smart strategic move of mine that I didn't even know was smart and strategic. But yeah, he passed me. I got a referral almost immediately. And so for the first couple of years, it was small contract to small contract. And I had a full-time job and I had two children at home. So everything was kind of going great. But then I got to the point where I started getting more excited about the business and finding business. And I was still doing my job really well, I think, but you just know, everybody knows where you get to the crossroads when you kind of lose steam. And it was then that I realized I should make a decision. I should do one or the other. Being both, I'm feeling very divided. It was very hard to walk away from a paycheck and benefits, but that is kind of the progression to 2020, which was 3 years after the first contract, when I said, okay, I quit my job, I lost my salary, and it was all unknown.
That was a bold and brave move. Good for you.
I
Good for
feel like it
you.
always is for
Yeah.
people, like any kind
Yeah.
of leap of faith, like literally you have no idea where you're going. But yeah, it
Yeah.
was very scary and it took a long time for me to get there. I mean, my husband is also an educator, so we do need resources and finances, and I had to be sure and or at least hopeful that we could keep things going, but it was very scary.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so now say more about that when you said you came to a point where you were at a crossroads and you knew you had to make a decision. Do you remember anything else about that time? What was happening, what you were thinking, or what you were feeling, or like how'd you know that you were even at a crossroads?
I had felt myself kind of, I had this nagging feeling in the back of my head for a few years that I was outgrowing the job that I had. And I ignored that feeling because, like I said, the job was a dream job. I loved the job. But because I wasn't able to innovate, because I don't know, just different factors, my family was growing. It over time it became clear like my heart was not there. And I think I would have stayed with the job if I hadn't been creating something in addition to it that really I never set out to create. But by the time I was really ready to leave the job, the business was ready to have me full time. And it was like really serendipitous because the job of doing trainings in East Africa ceased to exist after 2020 because we couldn't travel there because of the 2 years of stop travel. And so I don't think it would have existed after. But, of course, I had no way of knowing that when I was feeling this conflict. But yeah, it all kind of worked out.
Yeah, that's amazing. All right, so then you got some opportunities and kind of word of mouth and referrals, and then how'd you move into kind of really making it the thing that you knew you wanted to do and plan to build?
I think as I saw over time how everywhere I did the work, I felt like I could see some kind of impact immediately. And a lot of times it was just a teacher saying, like, thank you, or it's so good to be heard, or now I know what to do with that behavior problem. And I thought, I wonder if this is something we could spread larger than just here in the Twin Cities. Um, and I had spent a year abroad in my early 20s working at an international school in Warsaw, Poland. So I knew there was kind of this international school network. I knew there were networks outside of Minnesota, obviously, but I decided to make a really concerted effort to try and tap into them. And so once we started spreading, not just locally, but then domestically, and then we had our first international client, I thought, if the entire world is at play, like we can make this into something big.
Yeah, that's amazing that you were thinking globally. I mean, you were thinking big immediately.
It was only because I had had this previous experience. which I'm so grateful for because the actual experience was not great.
Oh,
But I think it planted this seed in me that it gave me a window into this other system that most people don't know exists. But I knew it was out there, and I knew because I had taught in it that they were having all the same issues that we were having here.
yeah, yeah. Now, would you say today you have purpose in your work?
Yes, 100%. I feel blessed every day. It feels like a dream that I didn't know that I wanted. Like I said, 10 years ago, I did not know. It's amazing to work in schools. It's hard. So, some of the first advice I got when I said I'm going to be doing consulting in education was do consulting, but not in education. People said, get out of education. It's a terrible industry. And these were people who had been in education. They're like, you can't make money there. It's a terrible industry. It's really volatile. And I have ignored that. And I'm still here because it's not just about what is the work we do, and it's about the impact. And you're an educator. It's hard if you're outside of that to realize how important it is. But every time I step into a school or I work with a teacher or principal, I feel really honored that I get to do that work and be in that environment because it's so meaningful to so many people.
Yes, and it sounds like it's meaningful to you because it's meaningful to so many other people.
Absolutely. I think education is it's a basic human right, and that everybody everywhere should have the opportunity to have good education.
Mm.
And that includes kids with special needs, which has been a lot of the work we've been doing recently. Um, so I'm really just trying to make sure that all kids can get what they need. And I've worked in places where that will never be achieved, like the systems in certain countries where I've worked, they do not accommodate students. So I feel like it gives me even more of a purpose to try and do what I can within the systems where I'm working to try and help that.
Sounds like that the idea of making an impact through education is the core driver and the thing that connects you mostly with your purpose. That's what it
Absolutely.
sounds like. Yeah, yeah. So now, do you think it's important for people in general? We're talking to high achieving women. Think it's important for them to have the sense of purpose in their life and or work?
I think so. There's a lot of conflicting messages about that. And I hear them all the time in the entrepreneurial world, but they mostly are coming from men who say you don't have to be connected to the work, you just have to be really invested in it. But I don't know how I can be invested in work I'm not connected to. And so I don't know if that's my perspective as a female or just who I am. But I think, especially for women who are raising families, all there are only so many hours in the day we can do everything, and so we want to be doing things that are meaningful. And I like to think, because my family's not always very happy with me when I have to like do work, but I like to think at least they're seeing that mom is doing something that matters. So for me, yes. For other people, maybe not. Maybe you don't need a sense of purpose to do the work. Maybe the work and the payoff is its own purpose. But for me, I just feel really connected to the purpose of the work.
Yeah. So that's what you were talking about when you say connected, connected to the purpose of the work. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So now this podcast, as you may know, I'm sure you listened to some episodes, is for what I call high achieving women. Now, here's my definition of high achieving women, especially for those who are listening, because they might have their own definition. Uh, she is responsible. Always, you can count on her to get things done. She's ambitious in a positive way. She's good at some things. And she's the one in her professional life where people come to her for advice, whether it's related to her area of what her work is or not. She's the one in her home life. She's the one that they come to, if family, friends, neighbor, community. She's the one. And so she's always giving out this support for other people. So when I originally started the podcast, it was to support her. Then I added on the layer, oh, she's also at that place where you were about 10 years ago, looking for more meaning and purpose and impact through her work. And she's not quite there. She's having the feeling like where you were
Mm.
feeling disconnected from the work. So, with her in mind, what's something you could share from your either your personal or your professional life that might be a source of encouragement to her?
Well, yes, I do have some advice. Again, I was kind of doing it before I knew I was doing it. But one of the things I was very grateful for in my job is that they let me do some professional development. They never questioned what it was, and I just kind of followed my interests. So the years I was the last couple of years at my job, I found, different workshops people had recommended that I didn't know much about, but they sounded interesting. And when you look on the map, they weren't they weren't super close to the actual work. They weren't even tangential. They were just things that I was really motivated to learn more about. And what I found that as I kept doing that, a little bit over time, or even reading a book that it doesn't have anything to do with work, doesn't have anything to do with family, but it's an interest, that kind of compounded. And then when I was ready to start my own business, I had acquired this skill set along the way just out of pure interest. And I think that's what I would say. Just follow the things that you're curious about and are interested in, even if they don't seem connected or related at all. You never know when it's going to become like a building block of something.
Yes, yes, and your story is a perfect illustration of that. Yes, absolutely. And it sounds like curiosity and innovation was a driver for you in addition to this wanting to make a meaningful contribution and have impact. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I haven't ever thought of it that way, but you're right. Curiosity is really what led me kind of away from the other job. And it's one thing, it's a really good um, quality to have in entrepreneurship because you never know what's going to happen and you have to kind of engage with each day with curiosity and open-mindedness, which is really hard sometimes, but yeah, it keeps me going and keeps me motivated.
Yeah, yeah. And when you talked about it, when I asked you if it had purpose in your work and you lit up, like all the energy, which is, I think, another
Yeah.
indicator for people when you kind of feel that energy rise up within. Yeah, and to your point, after exploring things that are curious or you're interested in will help you get to that eventually. And what I appreciate in your story too, you talked about it was like a few years, so people don't expect it to happen overnight. Like there was some time in between, so give it some time. And if they're taking your advice to then seek out things that they're interested in, they have time to really dig into those. Yeah.
Yeah, and even, right now, unfortunately, there are a lot of people jumping out of education and they want to jump into consulting. And it seems like they think it'll be a quick little hop, like over to the next thing. And what I want to say is, first of all, it's so hard to build and it takes a long time. But even the more you get out and expose yourself to different things, like do I work if I want to be a consultant, what kind of field do I want to work in? What kind of school, if it's education? Do I want to be facilitating or do I want to be doing one-on-one? Like all those things are important to discern. And you can do that while you're waiting. You can go, I mean, I do this all the time. I reach out to people and I say, "Oh, can I come see what you do?" And then, you get that feeling when you see it. You're either like, "Yeah, I could do that," or "Oh no,
Yep. What's an example of something you wanted to go see and you observed?
Back when I was not sure exactly what I would be doing after my previous job, I thought, you know what, I have the credentials, I love working in schools, maybe I want to run a school. So maybe I want to be like a principal or a head of school. And I started, before I did my own advice, I started applying for jobs. Um, and it was at the end of an interview cycle where I was being considered for head of school that I thought, you know what, I'm just going to talk to a few more people who do this and learn more about it. Like I think I know what it is, but I want to know what the actual experience is. And I talked to one person, Thank goodness. And he had talked me out of it, not on purpose, just telling me the reality of his job in about 5 seconds. And I thought, oh, I'm so glad you saved me from something I really wouldn't have been good at anyway. But yeah, I'm so glad I just started asking around and started, and people are always, not always, but I would say 90% of the time, people are open to talking and they're open to sharing their story. And so I guess it's something I've never been afraid to ask.
Yeah, it's a good strategy. Another one that like an expert strategy that you didn't realize was an expert strategy when you did it.
Yep.
Like this one and the other one kind of, do you know anybody else who might need my
Yep.
services? Yeah, it's really good. Something about instincts that come to you that, hey, this is the next right thing to do. Jessica, you've dropped so many nuggets. I'm sure. Remember in the beginning, I was like, I'm sure somebody will get at least one nugget from this. I think they got several nuggets of information and inspiration that they could take with them. Now, is there something that I didn't get to ask you that you'd like to share, or that if anything popped in your mind? If not, it's okay. But if is there one more thing you want to say before we tell people how they can be in touch with you?
I think I want to say thank you for creating spaces that honors women and women, high achieving women, women who are looking for purpose because it's a tricky space. It's especially in business, it's dominated by males. The drive often looks different. The motivations can be different, not always, but sometimes. And a lot of the messaging you have to filter out and be like, all right, what is actually relevant for me? So I just want to thank you. And to women who are listening, who are thinking, yeah, it seems like it's going to be really hard. It is. And having communities like this is really essential. So go find the communities, keep listening to the podcast, and find your people to help you remember why you're doing what you're doing.
Yes, yes. Thank you. And thank you for your kind words. I appreciate that and your wisdom. So now if people want to be in touch with you. How can they connect with you?
I'm on LinkedIn, and it's also easiest probably through my website, which is northshorelearning.org.
Okay. And we'll be sure to put that in the show notes. Jessica, thank you so much for spending your time and being generous with your wisdom and somehow your instinctual expertise.
Thank you so much for having me.
It was a delight. Okay, everyone, I'd love to hear your response to this episode. So connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm on all the socials, but I spend most of my time on LinkedIn. Connect there, and I'd love to hear your response to the episode, or if you just want more information and insights and stories and tools and resource like we are doing here, I share them on LinkedIn at Robin L. Owens, PhD, at Robin L. Owens, PhD. And until next time, this is Dr. Robin.